Disney Plus's latest series, The Bad Batch, is a great example of how to work continuity into your story, deep lore, and how to set up a twist that the audience can figure out before it happens.
I have something to say.
Hello, my chart leaders, and welcome back to the House of the Blue Dragon. Today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about the first episode, the pilot, the introduction to The Bad Batch, the new Star Wars series available on Disney Plus. And I thought about where I should talk about this, because there's a lot of the Star Wars fan in me, and there's a lot of the writing nerd in me, and they both kind of go off on this show. So I want to talk to you about all of it. Don't worry, if you haven't seen it yet, I'll give you a warning before spoilers, because there will be some spoilers in this conversation. And that's what we're going to have here. It's going to be more of a conversation than a review, but I think you'll get a firm understanding of my position on this series. So let's begin, shall we? Star Wars The Bad Batch is a continuation, a sequel series, I don't even know what you want to call it, to The Clone Wars. It picks up where the artistic style of The Clone Wars ended and builds on it into making something very impressive to look at, especially for an animated show on a streaming service. Just as a bit of an aside here, I've always thought that The Clone Wars looked brilliant. It's really, really beautiful animation, and I loved how they built off of that for Rebels, and I'm glad to see them kind of going back to this after the strange aberration that was Star Wars Resistance. It didn't really look all that good. The story was fine, but cel-shaded 3D models never quite look right to me. I'm glad that they've gone back to these textured models that really do sell the story a lot better. So how are they able to show continuity very, very quickly and succinctly in their story? Well, right from the get-go, we begin with the Star Wars Clone Wars logo burning away into the logo for the Bad Batch. Brilliant touch. Reminds you, oh yeah, these are the characters we met there. We're watching their story continue, but this isn't the Clone Wars anymore. The action opens with a Jedi and her clone troopers fighting in a desperate battle. And then we learn that Master's name. Now, before they said Master Doaba's name, I saw her and I went, oh crap. Because big Star Wars fan. And then as soon as they said Master Doaba, I lost it. I completely lost it. And the brilliance of the sequence is it does not belabor the point. If you know what is being referenced here, then this is an extremely meaningful moment to you. If you don't realize what's being referenced here, it's a Jedi talking with her clone troopers. This is very important when we're working continuity into our work. We need to be careful that we're not leaving behind people that aren't as plugged in as the superfans. Why did I freak out? Because I immediately realized, oh crap, that's Kanan's master. And the first thing that I said when I saw her was, I wonder if we're going to see Caleb. Because, I've read the books, I've read the comics, I've watched all the shows. I'm that person when it comes to Star Wars, if you can't tell. And so I immediately knew what this was. These were the events that led up to Order 66. And I was not let down. They brought Freddie Prinze Jr. back to voice young Caleb. He did a really good job. And we get to see, I'm assuming canonically now, exactly how Kanan escaped. Or Caleb, I guess I should say. But it was a brilliant moment. And it was a moment that did two things. One, it slightly contradicts the comics that had come out that told the story of Kanan Jarrus, but not too much. It basically fills in who some of the characters are, so we can say that that story took place through a glass darkly. It's a nice play on things. But immediately we jump into the story and we see our characters. If you are, like I said, super plugged in, you immediately feel that connection. You know where you are in timeline, and you know exactly what is about to happen. And from this point on, there may be some spoilers. There's definitely going to be at least one spoiler that I want to talk about, but you've been warned. Go watch it. It's really good. It's really good. This is Star Wars animation is, to me, the best that Star Wars is. When I think of Star Wars, my mind always goes to the Clone Wars, to Rebels, to the animated stories first, and then to the movies, even though I was introduced to the movies when I was a little kid. I grew up on the movies. But the story, the world building, and the characters are so much richer in the animated series that that's always where my mind goes. Now, the story of the Bad Batch is relatively simple. They're clone troopers, they're experimental, so they're all a little bit different. They're Clone Unit 99. Each one of them had one of their deviations in their genetic code augmented that makes them all kinds of special. So one's super smart, one's a super marksman, one's super strong, one's super strategic, and so on and so forth. You see how this is going. And it's an interesting conceit. The Bad Batch were interesting when they were brought up in the original series, and they're even more fun now that we get to see more of their characters, and especially how Zero has made his way into the group, how he has kind of coalesced into the group at large. This story takes place in the immediate aftermath of the Clone Wars. So the first, I would say, probably half of this takes place during Revenge of the Sith. Particularly during the last part of Revenge of the Sith. We learn very early at the beginning of this episode that Obi-Wan has traced General Grievous to Utapau, and about quarter to halfway through, we actually see the Emperor's speech where he declares, "The First Galactic Empire." Girl, please. Anyway, all of those things are necessary to clue other people into the story. Because if you've only watched Star Wars through the movies, then you need a handle. You need something to hold on to so that you know where you are in the tale, in the timeline. And both of those references do a really good job. Even if you didn't like Revenge of the Sith, this is a moment that will stand out in your memory. It's a moment that gets talked about a lot. When we get back to Kamino, because of course we go back to Kamino, we see Grand Moff Tarkin, though he's not Grand Moff Tarkin yet, he's just Tarkin, running around doing things because he doesn't think that there should be clone troopers. This is probably going to be one of the conflicts throughout this season. We also are introduced to Omega. Omega. Sweet, sweet little Omega. I have theories about her, but I'm going to hold off. At least until the end of this video before I say what they are, because Omega is a character that could really, really upset me when it comes to Star Wars. Really upset me. But I think I see what they're doing with her, and I can see it going one of two ways. So I have two theories, but we'll get there in the end. Essentially, the story goes the way that you would expect it for a military story to go. They're sent out on a mission. This mission is to test their loyalty. And of course, the mission is for the Empire, so it's, hey, go and kill all of these civilians being led by Saw Gerrera. Shout out to Saw Gerrera, who we get to see yet another cameo from. Also, a good handle to pull you into the story for anybody who's not that familiar but has seen Rogue One. Really nice putting these handles in there. You need to make sure that we're giving people things to hold on to in our stories. We are seeing the birth of the rebellion. We are seeing the birth of the rebels. They don't believe that the Emperor should have power, that the Republic should have become an empire. They see the threat that's coming and they're beginning to organize. They've already been termed insurgents, and the clone troopers are sent there to kill them. So much to say about that, but I'm going to hold off. If it hasn't been obvious to you already, as has been established in canon, the clones all have chips that have been placed into their brains that inhibit their natural instincts and make them follow orders. Most of the Bad Batch do not have these chips because their brain structure did not allow them to work. Of course, one of them still has it. Best you can't guess which one. Maybe it's the one who's constantly talking about how they're not following orders anymore, even though this has never been a problem for him in the past. Now, that's something that's really helpful if you have seen the previous episodes of Star Wars, the Clone Wars, that featured the Bad Batch, but if you haven't, we are told in dialogue that this is a problem. Why are you suddenly so concerned that we follow orders? We're the Bad Batch. We're the ones that do what we want to do, but we always get the job done. This is the central question of the series. What is the job? What are they here to do? Are they here to blindly follow orders or to do what's right? Beautiful, simple, crystal clear moral. This is something that Star Wars is built on. It's based on. There's a light side and a dark side. There's good and there's evil. And here we're presented very clearly with the light side and the dark side option. Which are you going to take? Of course, our heroes, because they are our heroes, take the light side option. It should not have been a surprise to many people because this is, after all, a kids' show. We're probably not going to follow the villains in a kids' show unless they're going to eventually get redeemed. So our heroes eventually find their way back into conflict with Tarkin, because Tarkin sees them as traitors. Traitors. Ooh, proto-rebels. Insurgents. I see where this is going, and hopefully you do too by now. Now, the most telling piece of dialogue in this entire story is when Tarkin is talking to one of the Kaminoans about the Bad Batch, and asks, how many experimental clones are there? And she says, 5. Now, this is a good trick in plain sight. I love it when stories do this because, again, longtime fans immediately went, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because there are only 4 members of the Bad Batch that are experimental clones. The 5th, Zeros, he is actually a clone trooper who's had really the worst luck of any soldier in the war. He's been abused, he's been broken, he's been torn apart. He's, as is said in explicit dialogue in the series, more machine now than man. Wonder if that's going to come back up at some point, because that's also said about Vader. Really curious to see how that plays into things. So if there are 5 experimental clones and only 4 members of the Bad Batch, who's number 5? Now, this is that moment that I told you about that I'm going to give kind of a big spoiler that's not a spoiler if you were paying really close attention and you had all the previous information going into this. That 5th experimental clone is Omega. Yeah, Omega is an experimental clone. Wait a minute, Omega's a girl. The clones are based on the genetic traits of Jango Fett. Wait a minute? Are you starting to see the problem here? Are you starting to see where this show might be going? The moment I figured this out, before I said anything to my husband, who was sitting over on the couch watching the show with me, when I pieced it together, I just said, Star Wars says trans rights. And I smiled quite broadly. He didn't get it. He didn't understand until we finally get the revelation in the story that Omega is the 5th experimental clone. Ooh, Star Wars says trans rights? All the question marks? Like, I don't know if there are enough question marks to question mark this question mark. So if Omega is a girl who was made from Jango Fett's DNA, and before anybody questions that, if you actually pay very close attention, because they do show this enough of this in this episode for anybody who's questioning it, she actually looks a lot like the young clone troopers, except for with female hair, a female voice, and female presentation. It's very clear that the experiments that were done on her did result in a female clone. Now, the question is, are they going to soft pedal out of this somehow and make it a genetic aberration that makes her a female clone, or did she identify as female, and is she going to be fully trans? At the time of recording this, I refused to go and look up an answer to this. I did. I don't care. Please, if they did say something publicly, you can put it in the comments if you want to, but I'm probably going to disregard it. I've said it 1,000 times. Representation doesn't count unless it's explicit in the universe. So it doesn't matter if Dave Filoni has said it or anybody else at LucasArts. If it's not expressly stated in the canon content, then it didn't happen. So I'm going to hold off my judgment on Omega's character until they give me final proof one way or the other. Right now, I don't see how they can get out of this, except for just being obnoxious and being like, who knew that in the genetic code there was a way to like flip a magic switch and make her a her. Now, the other thing that I think that they're going to do with her is she is going to be the one and only cloned Jedi. I have nothing to base this on except for a weird intuition. We are never told what her powers are, what special ability she has. We're never told this. Each of the experimental clones has one super thing about them. We are never told what Omegas are. We are also not shown what her position is. All that we know is the Kaminoans are very, very concerned that the Empire is going to find out about her, and that they don't want anyone to know about her until they understand more about the Empire's agenda. Well, that's interesting. She also seems to have a strong curiosity and this weird knowledge about things. For example, like Rey. She picks up a weapon and fires it without training and seems to be able to hit her target really, really well. That was the moment that I was like, oh crap, she's a Jedi. Now, this could be explained away that part of her genetic makeup gives her super marksmanship because, well, we have a character like that. But I think she's a Jedi. I think she's a Jedi. Or at least a Force sensitive, whatever we're going to call them in this series. We will see. Only time will tell. But I love how they used the little things throughout this series to make me think, to bring up little aspects of lore and to piece together the story for myself. That's something that we should all be striving for in our own work. I really liked the first episode of The Bad Batch, and I can't wait for the rest. And I hope you enjoyed me talking about it. I kind of want to do this more on this channel, where we talk about things that are in pop culture and analyze them and break them down. If you did, please give this episode a like, and if you're not already following the channel, please follow and hit the bell for notifications. I do 2 live streams every week that are productivity sprints on Wednesdays and Fridays, and I'm looking at adding another live stream throughout the week just to chat with y'all. Down in the comments, let me know what you thought about both this video and me doing more of this kind of breakdown of a topic and this particular episode that we're talking about of The Bad Batch. I would love to talk to you about this. Now, I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but Star Wars fandom has gotten a bit toxic. I have no qualms deleting toxic comments from this channel. I also have no qualms banning toxic commenters from this channel. Please be kind, be compassionate. I don't mind people disagreeing with me, but there's no room for abuse here. Until next time, remember, only working together and lifting our voices and taking action will we be able to stop Asian hate. Will we be able to remind the people who refuse to remember that Black Lives Matter, that Black Lives Matter, that Black trans lives matter, and that trans identities are magical. And until we see each other again, may you have the courage to ride your dreams into reality. And don't forget to have the fun. Bye.